We all sat through 2020, working from home, gaining a few pounds. I haven't seen the sun in a few months, and most of you have seen some small business go under. Nothing much has happened, and most of us have just adjusted to this new life pretty well. In today's video, I will tell you the way of progression and what it's going to look like for a lot of you. If you haven't noticed already, more and more companies and schools are realizing that it's actually pretty fine to work from home, and it's far better to do that than to get people coming in all the time. Of course, this works best for tech industries, with Microsoft, Facebook, and Amazon being the big ones to make this change permanent. And I feel like this will be the way to go from now on. So if you haven't hopped onto the programming bandwagon, now is the best time. Generally, with a high-paying job, the cost of living goes up. Say if you get a job in Silicon Valley, well, even though you will be making six figures, you will also be paying a large rent, and other things will be even more expensive there. But with the work at home set in place, you can work from anywhere and therefore still make six-figure salaries while living in your parents' basement. The con of this is that it will lead to more competition, meaning you will see more and more people infiltrating your field. There will be even more competition for the same job, and that is why you need to start by subscribing to my channel and begin the learning process. If you have decided to learn programming, you need to know where to start. A lot of people will say Python is the best option. It's easy, it's fast to learn, and there's a lot of support online. And while it is mostly right, it will only get you so far. The important stuff is application. You don't want to be building a video game that runs on Python. It will be clunky and slow. The most needed job for programming out there is software and web development, and many small businesses don't realize it right off the bat, but having a website for your business makes you a lot more professional. It helps your customers see what you have to offer. You can take feedback from them as well. And most of all, it helps establish a strong communication. Imagine it like this. If I wanted a sandwich today, I would not want to be going outside to a restaurant unless I know that they will have exactly what I want, since going out nowadays could mean a hospital bill in the future. So I would look up the closest restaurant and see what they have to offer online. Now, if you're a restaurant without a website, I would ignore you since you don't have a menu for me to reference before coming. You just lost a potential customer, and I just lost a potentially good meal that you could have offered. And yes, you can make websites in Python, but why go through that extra step? Sticking to the roots is going to be faster and easier. Now then, let's talk about where you can start and what's the best option moving forward. There are generally three kinds of apps: the web app, the native app, and the hybrid app. I will list the pros and cons of each type and give you my suggestion at the end, but hopefully it should be fairly clear. Starting with web apps. Try this. If you're watching this video on your computer, go to your dev tools by clicking Ctrl-Shift-C or I. At the top, where it's written Elements, there's a button to the left. It looks like a smartphone and a tablet. If you click it, your browser view will become the size of a mobile phone, and YouTube will automatically adjust to it. This is YouTube's web app view. This is what it will look like if you open YouTube on your phone's browser. If you make a website first on this view and then on the normal view, you just perform mobile-first approach, the cornerstone of web apps. Making apps like this is super fast. All you need is full stack and a world of imagination. Let's list the pros. Firstly, super fast dev time. Since you're using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make your entire project, your app can be made fast and be accessible to customers fast. Secondly, the cost. This is by far the cheapest option when it comes to making apps, since you don't have to worry about platform-specific development, and all it takes is a web developer. And thirdly, flexibility. You are allowed to use anything you want. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are just the beginning. You can even make your app in Python. Also, it is much easier to maintain. Looking for issues will always haunt you as a programmer. But as the Bible says, with great JavaScript comes great debugging experience. Coming to the cons, and there are many cons. Firstly, the speed. Since your app is running on the browser, it will not be optimized to its best capacity, though for many cases that shouldn't really matter. Secondly, it needs a browser to run. This is by far the biggest issue, since it becomes very inconvenient for your customers to go to their browser and look you up. Third, You won't have access to most of the device resources. Though with the whole PWA paradigm coming along, that shouldn't really be a problem as well. Fourth, your app won't be submitted onto an app store, since it runs directly on the browser. Fifth, now I use ad blocker on my phone to watch YouTube. It removes the ads, but at the cost of interactivity. The YouTube app works smoothly, but using it in the browser makes for a very bad experience. Simple tasks like scrolling get picked up as taps and a video starts playing. Those are some cons, and yeah, there are many more, but I'm making a point here. Anyway, coming to native apps. If web apps were 0, native apps would be 100. These are apps you make with platform-specific languages. For Android, it will be Java, and for iOS, it will be Swift or Objective-C. The pros are, they are basically the fastest in processing time, since they use device resources efficiently. Secondly, they are much easier to interact with. Being built for a specific platform, you can decisively make them work exactly as intended. Third, you get control over your device utilities, like camera or mic. The cons are, firstly, expensive. Understand that you will be paying for an Android developer as well as a Swift developer, unless you want to discard one of them.
I would choose iOS.
Both Android and Swift developers are uber expensive. To make an Android app, you need to know Java to a very good level, and you will generally spend all your time learning Java. And to make an app that runs on iOS, you will start by learning Swift. They are both complicated languages and make life harder as a programmer. Thirdly, your app will be very hard to maintain. Since it is written in generally 2 different languages, they will most likely have different bugs that you will have to look for. You will also have to keep them in sync. Any updates you want to make will cost you twice and take much longer to happen. Coming to hybrid apps. If the web app was 0 and the native app was 100, hybrids are 50. They split the difference, taking the best of both worlds and some of the bad parts too. Hybrid apps use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make the app, and it gets rendered inside a WebView container. The pros are, first, easy. Since you're using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make and design your app, it becomes much more easier for developers to learn and implement. Second, faster. Like a web app, this is faster to make and deploy. Thirdly, it doesn't need a browser and actually runs on all platforms. Fourth, it's way cheaper than native apps. Fifth, using APIs, you can gain access to device utilities. Sixth, this bad boy is fresh. It's being developed, and given some time, it will surpass the efficiency of native apps and the cost effectiveness of web apps. The cons are, even though it's faster than web apps, it's actually slower than native apps. The same goes for cost. It's a little more costlier than web apps, but not as much as native apps. Performance-wise, again, it's better than web apps but not native apps, though there are resources to make your hybrid app develop even better. If you're like me and see what's going on here, your conclusion would have to be to start with hybrid apps as well. So in order to get to that, all you need is the knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And to get the app part out of it, all you need is a framework like Cordova or Vue Native or React Native. The next thing that has happened and is going to keep happening is the era of serverless. What does that mean? If you wanted to make an app, you would have to buy a server space, a place to compute all the backend part of your code. But with serverless, you don't need to pay a fixed amount all the time to do your backend. Instead, you pay on an as-used basis. This, when used right, can end up saving a lot of money. The coolest one in my perspective is provided by Firebase. This deserves a whole video on its own. But imagine having a place where you get a database, free hosting, a good amount of storage, and even more for $0. And you only have to pay if you overuse it. To get a taste of what serverless feels like, check out Firebase and tell me in the comments if you agree. The one thing I would say though is Firebase uses NoSQL, and many programmers start with SQL. These won't go away, so don't worry and learn both of them. They both have their pros and cons. To make any legitimate app, you need a few things. You need a way to securely authenticate your users. You need a database to store their information. You need a good UI to provide a good user experience. And you need a way to load your app faster. Most of that will be easily handleable by services such as AWS and Firebase. But the only way you can make the UI stand out is by experimenting. Not taking shortcuts during development provides the best result for the user. Your job as a programmer is to struggle so that your users don't. In India, there is a saying, Atithi Deva Bhava. It means guests are like God, and that you should treat them as such. For programmers, your users are the guest. They stay in your app and use your services, and then leave. They will only come back if they feel welcome, and if your services were not lacking. With that, I will end the video. Like, share, and subscribe.